Lovely to speak to you today, Jillian. So nice of you to join me here today. So Jillian Godsil is an aspiring political activist, a blockchain leader, feminist, humanitarian, journalist, amongst many other things. So Jillian, thank you so much for joining me here today. And
thank you for such a wonderful introduction. I'm not going. Is that me she's talking about?
So to start with, I'd love to hear about your experience working in finance when you, first started off your career, and some of those experiences.
Okay. Well, there is actually one that tallies quite nicely from my first career to where I am now in the blockchain fintech world.
Yeah.
But my first career I was hired on the milk grant from Trinity to go and work with JP Morgan in London. So I was very excited. It was a big deal. I got a big starting salary. I was like, I was so shocked because I had just finished my humanities degree and I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do. I certainly did not expect to be hired by JP Morgan and to work in their systems department. And I knew when I filled out the application form, I went, corporate finance sounds very scary. I don't think about that. And then it was trading. Oh, it sounds very scary. Then computer science and systems. I went, I know nothing about computers. This is 30 years ago, or 35 years ago. So yes, I'll apply to there. They can't expect me to know anything. So I had a really interesting 3 years in JP Morgan, and I was supporting Treasury, back office as an analyst. And one of the things that was really funny, when I was there, swaps were huge, the financial instrument where you were swapping monies from either currencies or, again, pre-euro, or into different floating rates and fixed rates, whatever. And I remember JP Morgan had set up this McDonald swap. And because McDonald was in the middle of it, I can't remember the ins and outs, but it was a huge swap that went all around the country and the world, and it was just amazing. And we'd have our senior managers talk about this amazing swap. And then years later, I heard when I'd left, because the JP Morgan kind of alumni is still sort of there, people still chat, whatever. And I was there for 3 years as well. And I heard someone say that in the back office for Treasury, one day somebody opened a cupboard and all these tickets kind of floated out. And they were all the swaps tickets that the back office had no clue how to actually put into a spreadsheet or put into a ledger. So they just were closed up in a cupboard. Because if you think about it, a lot of financial instruments are just weird and wacky, and they often don't make sense. If you actually sat down and say, why am I paying for this? And why is this attracting this level of interest? Because they're so far removed from the underlying assets. It's kind of crazy, which is why I like cryptocurrencies. And when people say, oh, that's funny money, I'm going, have you seen what real money is like?
Wow.
So
that's interesting.
That's my swap story.
And how did you find the sort of environment of working there? Did you find it at all gender biased? Did you feel like you were one of the only women within your department, or did you have a lot of support?
Not really. I think when you're young, you're a bit blinder to stuff. I think then when you get older, I think maybe I had sort of unconscious bias, whatever. I mean, yes, I was, very few women were there, and I definitely was, but I was young, and I was, I wouldn't say brash, but I was outgoing and having a great time. And I actually bought a little flat with a friend in Islington, and I just loved the 3 years I was there in London. I loved it. So I'm sure there were loads of biases, or biases, whatever biases. But I had a good time. I was young, my first job, I had a good salary. I wasn't wild or anything. I mean, I party obviously like when you're in your early 20s, but yeah, so it's not terrible. I don't remember any problems.
Great. Well, that's fantastic. And so you had a great time there, and then you moved back to Ireland, got married.
No, sorry. Then we went to Australia and Singapore.
Australia. So I don't know. Yeah. You have to fill in the gap between going back to Ireland and married life and things like that, and then so you went to.
Well, I'll just very briefly. I became engaged to my husband in London. He also worked for JP Morgan. He got a transfer to Sydney, and I'd always wanted to go and see Australia. So that was like, we're definitely getting married at this stage. And we lived for 3 years in Australia.
Yeah.
And I moved from bad programming, I was a very bad programmer, to fintech PR, which I love because it was the writing. And then it was also, having spent 3 years crunching code with mainframes, I knew what questions to ask, and I wasn't scared of being stupid anymore. I mean, it was great for giving me confidence to ask questions. And so I moved into fintech, which I loved. I took to it, and I love the PR side of it, and I love the writing. And then I moved to Singapore for 2 years. And I also worked there. I was in, again, PR with Hill & Knowlton, another company, American company, and loved it, absolutely loved it. And then we came home to Ireland. And I went home ahead of my husband. And we had our first child in Singapore, and I went home when Georgina, I think, was 2 months. And he didn't come back for another 3 or 4 months. He had to finish up the project, whatever. And I bought a house in Dublin. So we had to stay here.
Wow. That's amazing. And it makes sense, you know, when you have children to sort of go back to your roots. But what was the, was it what was the culture difference between working in London, working in Singapore, Australia? Were they more advanced?
Vastly different. No, hugely different. I mean, because I loved my 3 years in Sydney, I have to say, amazing place. Very relaxed, very, you know, very, the Australians don't really do formal. The lifestyle is all outdoors. You know, the weather is wonderful. And I lived there too as well. It was very inexpensive. I know it's very expensive. Sydney is very expensive now. But we had expat salaries and stuff like that. So we were cushioned, but it was very cheap. I remember, like, the wine, you buy the wine for a couple of euros, whereas now I think wine is like a tenner, even from a wine shop, whatever. And the cheapest wine. So we had a great lifestyle there and really enjoyed it. And I loved the fintech, the air, but also being a writer, because for the 3 years that I spent in London, you know, people talk about imposter syndrome. Right. I actually was an imposter because I could not code for love nor money. I really couldn't. I mean, they had picked me to be a coder and a systems analyst. It wasn't in my blood, because I remember one time I was doing this course and someone said, "You're a creative, Jill." So that means I think I go from here and then I go here and I go, "Oh, I could go here," and then I see and I get distracted. I could be all over the place. That's not good code.
That's not good code, but that's a great
spaghetti junction.
Wow.
But it did mean, though, that it pulled me into the fintech, which I love the fintech world because it's innovation, it's exciting, and I do enjoy it, and I love the writing about it, just not the doing it. And then Singapore was amazing because a very different culture again. Lee Kuan Yew was still in charge, and he was the father of the modern Singapore. We actually lived next door to him, funnily enough, was where we were living. So there were loads of security guards around. But he, it was quite a nanny state at that stage. You know, you know, you're not allowed to eat chewing gum. The durian fruits are banned. So I found it was a little bit stifling. The people weren't that. I mean, I'm coming from Ireland. We're quite maverick. Australians are maverick. London's a city, so it's all the white boys. So I found a little bit too sane, I think, a little bit. But the food was amazing. Oh my God. And the people were lovely, very lovely. Yeah. So an enjoyable time.
And the expats are mavericks in Singapore.
I think so. Well, actually, funnily, I found that the hardest because I lived in London and I lived in Sydney, and I didn't go to Irish pubs. You know, I'm saying I'm working with Londoners or English people or whatever, you know, UK. And then in Australia, I'm working with Australian people. So I didn't feel the need to seek out fellow Irish men and women. I mean, I did know some, obviously, but I didn't do it on purpose. And then in Singapore, by virtue of how I looked, I was obviously an expat. So our lifestyle became very much expat, which I didn't enjoy so much because I felt I wanted to live and work in the country with the people. I mean, I was working with Singaporeans, but we didn't socialize that much with them, whereas I would have before in the other countries. I don't know whether that was me or how the society was set up. Yeah. And I suppose also we had like a country club membership.
Yeah.
So we were there a lot, you know, and that probably explains why we hung out with the expats.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, it's all part of the lifestyle. So then you came back to Ireland and the recession hit, and you had a bit of after having so many, you know, fantastic years, you know, incredibly successful, you found yourself in a bit of a tight spot.
I was on the wrong side of the recession.
You're on the wrong side of the recession. Yeah.
Well, I should point out in the interim too as well, we have we came back to Ireland. My husband came and joined me, and he had a number of good years. He worked in the IFSC, which is the financial centre in Dublin. And then he sort of had a bit of a midlife crisis and said, I can't do it anymore. So he sold our lovely Dublin house and we moved down the country, bought a room, and did it up as a guest house. And then as part of that process, he became the house father, the stay-at-home dad. We had 2 children at that stage. And we had a bit of adjustment to feel, but then we settled in. And then so I had my business. I set up it was a fintech PR business, and I had 3 or 4 people, I employed them. But because at that stage we had the Celtic Tiger before the crash, and we had a lot of equity in our house, a very small mortgage. So then we got a very big mortgage and we bought some property overseas because the Irish were going mad, but everyone was going mad buying property. But it didn't matter because I thought, well, I'm earning so much, I can pay this. And what happened for me was it wasn't just the recession that hit, it was the recession and divorce at the same time. And I'd been through the dot-com boom and crash. I'd survived that, it wasn't a problem, but I couldn't survive this particular, my own particular double whammy or a perfect storm. I just couldn't do it. So he went back to the UK. And basically he became bankrupt in the UK, which in effect gave all the debt to myself and our 2 children. So that was my divorce present. So I had this big house, big debt, and at the same time I'm fighting the divorce, and the recession's coming, and my business wasn't doing very well because I was so preoccupied with the divorce. It was one of those horrible divorces, and then the business started to collapse and bailiffs called. And so I said, I have to sell my house. I can't live in the house anymore. So we moved out, myself and my 2 girls, a little cottage nearby, because I'd given the girls ponies. Girls had ponies before. Yeah. And I'd sort of promised them during the horrible divorce, you'll always have your ponies. Yes. Fatal error. Never say that. Say you'll always have your hockey sticks, not ponies. Ponies end up being too expensive. So anyway, we moved into this little cottage with stables. I brought the horse because I couldn't afford the DIY livery at that stage. So ponies at home, that was grand. We were all mullicking along. And I made a video to sell the house because I had to get rid of the house because I wasn't living there anymore. Oh, and the drug squad evicted our last tenants that were in there, as it happened. So I couldn't even, I'd rented the house to drug growers. I didn't know it at the time. But when the drug squad did a 7 o'clock in the morning raid and dragged them all off to prison, whatever, but I couldn't sell the house. I couldn't rent the house because they'd been growing plants all over the place. You know?
Oh my God. So unlucky.
It was unlucky. So I made a video to sell the house, and the gas thing was this video went a bit viral. It was kind of quirky. And next minute, I'm on the front page, first of all, of every paper in Ireland. And then I ended up being on TV and radio. This is like weird. I mean, what's happening here? And I kind of epitomized the story that was happening to Ireland in the financial crash. And there was the divorced lady with her 2 children, you know, and the banks. And then, this video I made to sell the house. I got a cash offer of 500,000, but because it wasn't the same as the mortgage, the bank refused consent to sell, and they preferred to repossess the home. And then they sold it for 165,000 the following January. Made no sense. So I'm kind of at this stage, I've become activated because I'm going, this is not fair. And the banks were doing a big number on shame. So if you failed financially, there was something shameful about that, which is ridiculous because the whole world was in a recession. So people failing, men in particular, were committing suicide left, right, and center. There was 1 a day of suicides. Oh, it was terrible across the whole country. Yeah. And there was this sort of narrative that somehow, if you failed financially, you were gaming the system or trying to, nobody really gambles their family house, with who wants to be out in the street. Nobody. I mean, there's a small percentage of people who maybe are chancers, but you make laws for good people, not for the tiny percentage of chancers. So I got very cross, very activated. And then because I epitomized the story of what was happening in Ireland, I said, it wasn't just here. I was on, Jerry Paxman had me on BBC 2 Newsnight when he still had that show. And I was in Russia Today and Al Jazeera, and they'd send crews in and they'd say, what's your story, Jill? I'm going, oh, okay. So I got very good at ranting. I ranted and raved a lot. And it was good though, because it meant that people could start to talk about it, because before people were ashamed of failing financially. And while it hurts horribly, you're not robbing people, you're not killing people, you're not stealing. If you fail financially, you fail financially. And sometimes it's not even your fault. It's not through hard work or lack of hard work. Sometimes, look at now, we're coming out of lockdown. How many businesses will fail now because they can't reopen because of social distancing? That's not their fault. So there's a whole rake of reasons why people fail financially. And it's most often, it's not, if people are in business in particular and they're failing, typically they're working very hard. It's not, they're not the lazy types that set up their own business, as a rule, I got just so cross about that. And then when the banks repossessed my home, I realized I still owed the debt because you can't hand the keys back. So even though they had repossessed the home, I still owed the million whatever on the mortgage. And then I realized that we had inherited UK law, which meant that you weren't allowed to run for public office if you were a bankrupt. So the day after I was bankrupt.
Or when did, becoming, going from being in the spotlight, you suddenly made the connection to, I want to also get into politics now. When did that happen?
Well, I'm a very slow burner. It took about like sort of 10 years to get there, right? Well, maybe not 10 years, maybe 6 years. But I began to see the huge injustices
Right.
that what was happening. Right? That was the first thing that hit me. I'm going, and then the attitudes, and then the banks. I mean, and here in Ireland, we bailed out the banks. The public purse bailed out the private banks. That made no sense. I wasn't being bailed out. My neighbor wasn't being bailed out. So why were the banks bailed out?
Yeah.
And banks, they used to serve people. Banks used to provide a service, and they used to give credit. They'd help you buy the bigger things you couldn't afford from your own savings, maybe. And they used to serve people. And now all they care about is the bottom line. I mean, here in Ireland, we have much higher interest rates on our mortgages and on all our loans than the rest of Europe. Why is that? It's because they're greedy, they can get away with it. And there's also a really classic story. People say, oh, the banks, they're fine, they're regulated. They're not. We had mortgages called tracker mortgages here in the boom, in the Celtic Tiger. And they were basically loss leaders for banks because they wanted to inflate their books, their loan portfolios, because it made them seem better and more powerful. And the tracker mortgages were at whatever the LIBOR rate or even less than that, but they were loss leaders because then they would sell other stuff on and their balance sheets would be huge. They become very powerful banks. Maria, it was all loans that they had. But then what happened was I think it was about 6 years ago, all of a sudden, and these people were on the tracker mortgages because we're buying houses, but the interest rate was so low. It was so low, it was, you could, for any paying like 1 or 2%, you can afford to borrow more. And also they were always going to track the interest rate. So it wasn't like a fixed term. These were they were very powerful loans if you could get them. Mm-hmm. But all the pillar banks here that had offered the tracker mortgage, they all stopped them. They just stopped them. So overnight, people went from like 1 or 2% up to 5 to 6% on their loans. They couldn't afford them. Of course they couldn't, because we're in recession here too as well. So you had, I think in total, there were 46,000 families affected. And during this time, people who mortgages went from like 1 or 2% up to 5 to 6%, people lost their homes. People committed suicide. People came sick. It was just horrendous. And they were all blamed because you took out that loan. And in actual fact, what happened was there was two things going on. One, it was a monopoly because the banks did it in a cartel. They all did it together at the same time. They all fecked off the people off this tracker mortgage. And secondly, it was illegal. They weren't meant to do that. They actually were acting illegally. Wow. So when people say to me, the banks are normal, and no one will go to prison for that. Nobody, because it's white collar fraud and they're bankers. Nobody will go to prison for that. But people lost their lives on that. Because can you imagine, you have a mortgage and it'll triple overnight. Yeah. How could anyone pay that? And then the stress and the illnesses. So not only people who committed suicide or who died by suicide, people would have died by cancer. They would have died by all the other things that stress causes. Marriages fell apart. Kids grew up in horrendous households where parents were fighting because their mortgage tripled overnight. So, that's the ranting Jill, right? it's horrendous. So anyway, at the back of all that, I wasn't allowed to run for public office. So I brought the Irish government to the High Court and I argued that my constitutional rights were being infringed because I said, there's nothing shameful in what I'm doing. I should be allowed to run for public office. And in the heat of the hunt, the law was changed. There was a bit of a thing. They fought me at first and then they agreed to change it because the next election's coming up for the 2014 European Parliamentary elections. So I changed just in time for that. So I had a 4-week run at the European Parliamentary elections. I ran in Ireland South and it's a huge constituency. And I had 4 weeks, no money, no party, but I got 11 and a half.
Why did you not have a party? I'm interested.
Oh, because I didn't like any of them.
Really?
I was just disgusted.
Why did you not set up your own party?
Well, there's usually quite a lot involved in that. Yeah. And also, I don't know, I become this ranty lady, I guess, and it's not that I wanted to be a politician per se, that wasn't really in my blood, but I knew this one issue. I had been given a voice and I wanted to take all the crap that I had suffered and my children had suffered and that everybody else had suffered too as well over the last 6 years or whatever. And I wanted to make something good of that. So when I changed the law, I went, do you know what? This gives me purpose. This gives me agency. This brings back some of my control over my life. And it's not that I didn't want to be a politician. And I was single issue too as well. I was purely on the banks and the debt and right. And that's, although mind you, as it happens, if you ever run for politics, when you are a European parliamentary candidate, everybody wants to know what you had for breakfast. They want to know what your opinion is on green issues, on voting rights, on women's issues. And all of a sudden I had to arm myself with loads of opinions that I'd never really thought deeply enough about to have a public opinion on. I learned a lot.
Theoretical, it's not based on your own experiences, whereas this single issue was something that you had
Yeah.
visceral experience of.
Yeah, and also because I spoke so public, it happened accidentally. I mean, I call myself an accidental activist. I didn't intend to go out. I just, because the video went viral to sell the house originally, and then when the banks refused to sell, it was like bullying banks, you know, and it was just, it sort of captured the imagination of the world stage that was looking at this particular piece of information. I don't mean world stage in that sense, but people who were writing it captured their imagination. So it was just a way of. I mean, I was delighted to do it, but I wasn't intent on being a politician. I mean, I don't want to be a politician.
You remind me a bit of, I'm not sure if you've seen that sculpture of the little girl that's standing up to the bull. That's pretty much you encapsulated.
Well, thank you. Do you know, and I felt that way because you know how sometimes I didn't have like a campaign manager. I didn't have, you know, all my friends were apolitical. I live in the countryside. All my friends are horsey. They don't do politics. I don't know. They just don't do politics. And like in Dublin, I would have had a political set, but not down the country. I don't know. I just didn't hang out with them. And it was kind of weird trying to do that because I'm thinking, am I saying the right thing now? That's quite scary because you haven't got, if you're part of a party, there will be policy and procedures and they'll say, well, this is how we think on this subject. And you go, okay. But I had to think for myself. And that was scary thinking, what if I get it wrong? What if I say something and I don't mean to? But I get it wrong and they come after me because the other thing I learned as well, when I was an activist, people treat you very nicely. I've done a lot of radio shows, but no one, I mean, once or twice they'd ask me about the debt, but it was never really, I had a pretty an easy ride of it, if you like. There weren't very hard questions being asked. I mean, I wasn't making big noises. I was just sort of saying, you know, this is where I'm at and it's unfortunate and I'm, you know. And then when you become a political candidate, the knives come out. And you're asked very hard questions. And I found that quite unnerving because it's not, you know, and it was scary.
The support of a party then. And people fight your battles as well, you know, even on Twitter, it's, you know, it's difficult to, you know.
I mean, I had supporters. I remember one time I wrote a blog about, there's a tragic case. I don't want to divert too much into mother and baby homes in Ireland. Have you heard of them? The Magdalene Laundries, where unwed mothers women became pregnant, were put into these laundries to work, and they basically became slaves. Initially the babies died because they didn't care about the babies because they were unwed, you know. Where the fathers were, nobody even looked or questioned that.
Wow.
And then after a while, these institutions, which were run by nuns in the connivance of the state, they discovered they could sell the babies to America. So but there was one place in Tuam, I know it's a very bad.
And that's still going on today?
No, but it was going on until the 80s.
Okay.
And then only about 10 years ago, a woman was doing a lot of work, an historian down in Tuam, in a mother and baby home, and she discovered in a septic tank thousands of bodies of babies. So these are babies who had died at a very young age, maybe at birth or shortly afterwards. They hadn't been given proper burials or anything like that. And women were locked up. They were voiceless members of society. So I wrote a piece about dirty girls and dirty something else, whatever. And I aligned the shame, the reason those women were incarcerated. I mean, I met some of them afterwards. I mean, the government, by the way, turned around, apologized. There was a fund to, I mean, it's a bit late, they're all in their 60s now at this stage, whatever, but there was a fund to compensate them, and there was a public apology. So I mean, it's recognized it was a very dark time in our history, and it's only recent history. But and I met them, and they were amazing people. But I was trying to equate the shame that kept those women in those mother and babies homes. It was the same shame that was being applied to Irish people who couldn't pay their mortgages. And so it was quite a harsh piece. And then, oh my God, I remember you said on Twitter, there was a couple of people who went through me for a shortcut. They were vicious to me. And I'm like going, whoa, what am I going to do here? But then what happened was I had supporters who came in and said, she's not dissing these babies. She's talking about what shame can do to a culture. So, but that was scary. That was one scary time I thought, ooh, I'm going to be torn apart here now.
Why do you think it is that, surely what you're doing is very positive. You're standing up for people who feel, you know, shame for whatever reason, for financial reasons, and you're standing up for them. Why is it that people react to that in such a vicious way, and they want to keep people in their boxes, and they, you know, keep that form of behavior as you know, see it as?
I think it's a narrative. I think it's a control thing by the I'm going to say, if I say the governing bodies, that sounds like I'm really, you know, conspiracy theorist, whatever. But do you know what I find the most strange? And this is the thing that it emphasizes for me. During the financial problems where people were losing their homes or they weren't losing their homes or whatever, but people would say, oh yeah, but you know, the Joneses down the road, they're getting 2 foreign holidays a year and they drive the big sports car they're driving there, and you know, they're not paying their mortgage. I know they're not paying their mortgage on their room. And you think, how do people know that? And how do they know what's going on inside that household, for starters? I mean, maybe they're not paying the mortgage. Maybe they have got the big car, but they can't hand it back because the payment, I don't know. We don't know what goes on in these houses. And half these stories are just being told. They're made up. And it's like it controls it. I get very frustrated, but people, they did a campaign there. Our outgoing Taoiseach, when he was Minister for Social Protection, he had a campaign that said, let's go and get the dole scroungers. Now, there's a whole narrative about people on the dole, intergenerational families on the dole and scroungers and milking the state for the welfare money. I get that. And it's not very nice if you come from a family where you haven't got education, you don't have ambitions, you want to milk the system because it's easier or I don't know, whatever. It's not a very good place to be. I wouldn't like my children doing that. And by the way, I have been on the dole and I've been very happy. It supported me when I went through my very bad times, right? But I would not be envious of a family doing that. I'm much crosser at the person at the top of the pile who is not making it work. You know, if you think that people are abusing the system at that level, make it work for them. Do education. You know, I mean, education is the key, I think, to a lot of these things. Do outreach programs. Improve, like if there's bad areas in our cities where you have lots of families and they're intergenerationally reliant on the dole, put projects in there. Bring people in, you know, spend money on those places that need it. Get rid of the drugs. You know, that makes total sense to me. And by the way, maybe take some of the money from the fat cat's salary at the very top, who works his 9 to 5 and drives his big Merc home every night and doesn't think about anything. And he's paid 100 or she's paid 100, 200,000 a year. And the problem's not solved.
I almost see it as a form of allowing these people to continue on in their, you know, beautiful, you know, having their fancy homes and cars and holidays, and they might feel guilty about the inequality, but rather than feeling guilty and feeling compassionate and feeling an obligation to give back, they will sort of shame them in order to justify their behaviors, justify the inequality.
It's a narrative. Mm-hmm. It's a narrative. It really is a narrative. And I think sometimes, I mean, I've got into fights with a couple of ladies that I'm very good friends with, and they are the nicest people in the world. We sing in a choir together. So I always think, you know, middle-aged women singing in choirs tend to be nice people. But we had a huge argument until like 3 o'clock in the morning. And I could not persuade them that rather than being cross at the people who were on the dole and, you know, gaming the system as was, and not the person at the top of the pile who runs the department, who hasn't got a program. Because, I mean, I know we always will have the dole and there's always a certain number of unemployment in the state, whatever. But I mean, it's true, there are families that no one has worked. And why is that? Because they haven't had the education, the skills. I mean, wouldn't you rather your child was pursuing their passion, and whether they were earning zillions or a small amount, but they were doing it and they were working and, you know, feeding themselves and, you know, and I think certainly nowadays, my generation, I think, have that. It's an unconscious bias too, as well. It's easier not to look. I'm just going to have my money, whatever. But I think younger people are aware of the inequalities. That income inequality is people are aware of it, and including women's not getting the same amount of money as men.
And I think it's a generational thing. You know, millennials aren't as well off as their parents' generation. They don't have as many opportunities to buy a home, student debt, all sorts of things. So they're very acutely aware of the sort of injustices. But I would love to know how you then came across blockchain, and if you think blockchain could be a solution for a lot of these problems that we've just discussed, and the recession and so on and so forth.
Well, after the election finished, and I got 11,500 votes, very proud of that. Not enough to get a seat, but enough to know that I said something right, basically. 11,500 people voted for me. And for the next year, I thought my life was over. What will I do next? I don't know. And I just got off the dole. I think I just got off the dole. I've been trying very hard to get off the dole. And as I say, I'm very grateful that I was on it, but very grateful to live in a country that supports people, you know. But I thought my life's kind of over. That's kind of it. That's it. And then because I was involved with the software project, a startup that went nowhere, and it was reignited, but going to go on the blockchain. And it was around the time of the crazy ICOs, the initial coin offerings, the way of raising money in using cryptocurrencies. And of course, it was mad and it was crazy. But what I loved more than the fact about the money, I love the technology, because it's a disruptive technology. And God knows we need disruptive technologies and ways of looking at the world these days. I mean, we're in the middle of the biggest one with the pandemic, of course. And you know, I mean, I may just sort of digress slightly there.
Yes.
With the pandemic here in Ireland, we managed to clear all the trolleys. We'd normally have a trolley count between 400 and 600 people on trolleys in, you know, they admitted to hospital, but they're not in a war, they're on trolleys. We cleared all that out. The government took over all the private hospitals to make way for the surge. And as it happened, we didn't need it because we flattened the surge, thank the Lord, before it got crazy. Mm-hmm. But if the government can do that in lockdown, they can do it outside lockdown. I mean, for me, it says, wow, we can look after the vulnerable. There's nobody on the streets. You know, all these things were solved because they just did it. They applied money to it, and they did it. So going back to the blockchain stuff, I mean,
at a vast expense.
Yeah, but you know what? It's only money.
Yes.
You know, and then if you get the country back on its feet again, and you haven't lost half the population, mm-hmm. you're in a much better place to start off again. Right, let's just make this work. But the other thing, so apart from the money side, which was interesting, the technology is disruptive, which is always good, I think, because it makes us think about stuff, and we don't sit in our, you know, our fannies and the American version, and you know, and I just ignore stuff. But I also love the ethos. The people who work in this space, they are, not only are they thinking outside the box, mm-hmm. they are, and it's not all young people either. It's, you know, it's old fogies like me, and it's a way of rethinking the world. And these people, they want to be successful. They're not hippy dippies. Well, they do want, but they want like water for everybody, housing for everybody, health care for everybody, but they also want to be successful. They want to buy their Teslas or their Lambos, whatever it is. So it's not, it's a nice way of saying to be successful, you don't have to beat someone else up. It's not a zero-sum game. We can be successful and either have a project that addresses needs, like, you know, clean water for everybody, or have a project that doesn't. Maybe it's like luxury taps or whatever, but part of that money goes off to clean water.
So it's a win-win. Everyone wins in the end.
Yeah, that's the plan. And that's the way we want to live in the world, don't we? I mean, if you think about it, do you want to win and let someone else not succeed? You know, that doesn't make any sense to me.
Yes. I think that needs to be communicated, because people do still live in this mentality of a zero-sum game where you've got a pie, and, you know, if someone has that size, you have, you know, a small slither. So people still think in that mindset. They don't think in sort of abundance mindset. Why is it, do you think, that people are so scared of blockchain, and what is FUD?
Well, FUD is the old IBM term. They said no one ever got sacked for buying IBM equipment, because the IBM salesman would say the other equipment was bad. So fear, uncertainty, and doubt. They would. Right. So you had to buy the IBM machine, was the only machine that works. That's kind of an 80s sort of story. But the reason why blockchain and cryptocurrencies have got such a bad rap is because governments and banking institutions don't like it, because it takes the control away from them. Because in the future, and even now, people do live off grid. People can actually not worry about fiat. They can actually earn their money in cryptocurrencies. Mm-hmm. Now they can exchange it out if they need to buy fiat stuff. Maybe they need to buy milk in a shop that doesn't accept a cryptocurrency. So, although increasingly there are ones that do. So people can live off non-fiat money, and that makes governments and banks very scared, because it makes them scared because they want to get rid of it, because it threatens their being, it's all the control. But also at the same time, I mean, like when JP Morgan, my old employer, Jamie Dimon, who's the head of that, he would be very vocal and anti-Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies and blockchain. And yet all the time, JP Morgan was investing in loads of patents in blockchain. And last year they brought out the JPM coin for back office transactions. So they know exactly how powerful this technology is. Yeah. And the governments and banks and mm-hmm. people who are in control now, they don't like change, because this disruptive technology has the means to take away mm-hmm. their business or their governance.
Okay. So we're going to get a massive split then between people who are pro-government and banks, and those who are sort of more and archaic who
Well, no, it's not even archaic, because I consider myself, you know, a really middle-aged, middle-class mum. You know, I never burnt my bra. You know, my first protest march was in 2016, and that was when the the Parliamentary opened,
Yep.
and I went along and I parked my car, and I went along and I put my parking in, and I had my photograph taken with the policeman outside the door. That was my. So I'm certainly not an anarchist. You know, I'm very old-fashioned in many ways, but it's just injustice. You know, injustice is wrong, and that it's taken me a while to see how much injustice there is in the world. And so I think increasingly the blockchain and cryptocurrencies, people will see it's another way of doing things. And as it happens, the governments and banks are all trying to grab it too as well, by the way. You know, they're huge, trying to capitalize, because they know it's not going to go away. It's absolutely, you know, the genie's out of the bottle. It's not going to go away. And something else someone said to me, it was actually Stephen Rust, who is the CEO of Bitcoin.com. And he was saying, the reason why he loves cryptocurrencies, he's a well-known player in this space. He said that if you have a cryptocurrency, the only reason it has value is because the people who are in that community believe in it. So it could be like a horse coin, or a Doge coin, actually a real one, or it could be, you know, an ecosystem where people use that coin on that ecosystem, and they all believe in it. It's belief, because money is only valuable because we believe in it. And he said, how much more fun that, let's say you had a cooperative that you're all about education, and the token you exchange and you paid was based on the education. So your passion is also your money. You know, whoa, isn't that interesting? Yeah, you could earn money with your passion and then spend it, and it's your passion. It's not even like it could be an education coin or something like that. It's kind of mind blowing. I went, whoa, yeah, that's nice. And money, because, you know, they say love of money is, you know, the root of all evil. But imagine if the money was something you actually loved, and it wasn't just a pure money thing, it wasn't just a greed thing, because by earning this particular form of money, you're engaging in your passion, helping people maybe.
Yes.
Wow.
Okay, so blockchain and you know, cryptocurrencies, they can support communities and these small ecosystems, you know, these niche communities that are and people's passions. That's really powerful. And so if you are, because I know you're a big fan of horses, and I'd love to hear more about that, how would it work practically to create a coin for, you know, horse lovers, let's say, or for, because it's you work in a charity, how would it work in that context with a charity?
Well, I have been thinking about this, and certainly during the crazy period of the ICO madness, I thought, oh, maybe I could raise money, because Ireland is the land of the horse, you know, and maybe there could be some sort of thing where it's an ecosystem where we buy horses and we train them and we race them, and then there's betting, not that I'm gambling, you know, but you know, but also there's horse jumping, or maybe it's dressage, or it's eventing. So, and then unfortunately the whole money craze sort of went. So I'm actually a director of the equine charity, the Irish Horse Welfare Trust here in Ireland, and we are constantly looking for money, because especially now in the lockdown we can't do our fundraisers, and it's expensive to run the farm and the welfare work that they do, and the education and training and stuff. So I haven't cracked it yet. It's kind of rolling around the back of my brain. My daughter also works with horses and is passionate about them, but I know, for example, that there's a thing called a Doge coin. It's kind of a fun coin, and a group of people set it up, and it has value because the members valued. Now it's not huge. I don't know, maybe it's, I don't know, 100,000 market cap. I don't know. I'm guessing wildly here now. But the Doge, they're very loyal. They use it to buy, and they send it and exchange it, and it's kind of interesting. So I don't know yet. It's been on my brain. So there must be a way to do it for horses, for the charities that I'm involved in, but I haven't quite figured out how to do it yet.
That's a call to action to.
Yes, it's you're giving me a job. Thank you very much.
Yes, and I'm looking forward to seeing if you know, what comes of that. That sounds very exciting.
Put it out to the universe. You're right.
Yes, exactly. So what do you think is the importance of getting more women in blockchain, if it is the future, and obviously it's important when we're designing tech products that we are inclusive? Is that the main reason why you think it's important to get women in blockchain, or are there multiple layers to this?
Well, I think we're discovering as we go along that there are so many inequalities, and it's not just women. I mean, the Black Lives Matter protests around the world. It's interesting because like as a woman, I'm aware of bias against women, but I wasn't really aware of all the bias against Black Lives Matter, you know, as in the, because I'm not, I'm white, you know, so I didn't see all that. And even in Ireland, I would have come from quite a privileged background, you know, so I would have very well educated, very supportive family. So it's hard. You need to have your eyes opened, right? So with regard to women in blockchain, because I think blockchain is such an important platform, a technology, it's disruptive, it can do so much good stuff, but I don't want to leave it just to the boys, you know, because I think men are lovely, but we live in a world that's 50-50 or even 51 women, I think, and 49 men. But we need women in there because women have a different way of thinking of things, women have a different way of approaching things. And not all women are alike either. You know, you and I have probably vastly different ways of thinking. So I'm not saying we're all alike, but we need to have the same number of women. Otherwise, I don't want to spoil it, you know. I mean, there's a joke, you've heard me say it in my last talk, that if the Lehman brothers had been the Lehman sisters, we mightn't have had the 2008 financial crash. It was all white, male, middle-aged men who were in charge of all those banking and trading, and it imploded. It imploded. And no more than women, you need diversity too as well. So it's broader than just women. I mean, I focus because I'm a woman on women, but you know, we need color, we need sexual orientation, we need race, we need religious differences, because I mean, research has proven time and again, the more diverse a company is, the more diverse a country, which is interesting what a country is, the more successful they're going to be, because you've got different ideas and creativity, and it's like, oh, and it's also, and it's nice too as well. I like to mix with people who don't think the same way as me, who challenge me on my thoughts, because it's a bit you know, uncomfortable sometimes. When I mean, my kids sometimes will say, "Mom," like classic. my kids are great. They're like they're 26 and 23. One's vegan, one's vegetarian. Huge animal lovers. My elder daughter works with horses, passionate about it. My younger daughter loves animals, but she's working in technology and business now. Anyway, they're fantastic. But do you know what they love? Tattoos. Okay. Do you know what their mother hates? Tattoos. So every time I get a new one, I go, and I have this face on me. And they have such fun. I think they have more fun on my face than, you know, on the tattoo itself. And they recently bought a home tattoo kit. So they come home every few days with, you know, daisies, and I'm going, oh, stop. But so even though, and they say, Mom, are you body shaming us? I'm going, no. But anyway, so it makes me very uncomfortable. I love my girls, and I look at the tattoos, and you know, it's the number thing that I find difficult. That's my problem. I mean, that is so my problem, you know. And so everyone to say to be confronted by different ways of looking at things is not always comfortable, but it's good for me because I'm getting better. I'm practicing no face. Not working yet.
No, it's brilliant. Well, thank you so much for the talk today. It's been absolutely fascinating. And what would you say are the sort of top takeaways from this talk for people who?
Ooh. Well, I've enjoyed it very much. Thank you very much. It's always lovely to rant and rave. I appreciate that very much. Thank you.
We're waiting for your autobiography.
Oh, I'll get around to it someday. The top thing, well, I think keep on learning is, you know, every day is a school day. That is so true. That it really is. I find, and I love being in this area that I'm learning. And I'm learning not just about things and facts and figures, you know, I'm learning that I do body shame my girls, and I've got to stop it, you know, and I'm trying very hard. So I'm learning to be a better person in that way. And I think the other thing too, as well, that another takeaway, I think people have to learn to be kind to themselves, because there's enough in this world. People will take you, even your inner voice will take you down. And, you know, while we all strive to be the best version of ourselves, you know, some days we're good, some days we're not so good. Some days I'm very proud of myself. Other days I'm kind of going, didn't achieve so much today, did we?
And that's a powerful message, especially now during the lockdown, because it's hard to continue, you know, your normal routines in this environment. And everyone's got their own struggles, and uncertainty is tough.
Well, and the other thing I would add to being kind to yourself, which is very important, very, very important. And then what you're just saying there, be kind to other people, because you have no idea what's going on in their lives. No idea. And sometimes, I mean, I do get annoyed and I do fight with people, and, you know, and I remember a friend of mine recently saying to me, but you have no idea what's going on in their life. And I went, yeah, you're right. Okay. Tone down the righteous indignation. Tone it down. Just, okay. Yeah. I don't know what's going on in their life. I'm going to step back and, you know, not be so cross.
Wow. So thank you so much. It's been great chatting to you. And I will thank you this recording when it's
thank you. Well, do you know what I love is I feel as if we're old friends at this stage, and I've had just a great chat.